Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Maria, and here on this channel you will receive tutorials on how to design jewelry pieces and other neat objects for 3D printing. Most of us know the situation. We have a clothing piece that is tucked away in our closet. It is actually really nice. It has a lovely shape, it has a great color, but there's something off about it. There's a design piece or a picture, an embroidery thing that we actually then that makes us not want to wear it that often. So in my case, I have this orange sweater here that has the brand name written on the front. And I personally don't really like to be the walking advertisement for someone. So I started to make this gold-plated brooch to cover up the brand name. It also has a text on the front. It is a wordplay on the brand name. And not everyone can read it directly, but I always laugh to myself about it and enjoy this piece much more now since I've personalized it and made it more my own. So let me show you how I created this brooch on Fusion360, my go-to 3D CAD software.
Before you start designing away on Fusion360, do check out the design guidelines from your 3D printing service provider. So for Shapeways, for example, the one that I usually select, they have a great ecosystem set in place for getting something printed and cast all in one go. You can check out the design guidelines on their website. They have design guidelines for each material. For example, for the wall thickness from our brooch, we need to consider the wall thickness of the plate. We need to consider the text details. They need to be visible. I, for example, had to learn the hard way. When I first started out 3D printing, I designed some very nice jewelry with very fine details, and then I couldn't get it printed because the details would just break off or not be actually visible. So I hope I can prevent you from making the same mistakes that I did. Another optional step before entering Fusion is to select a typeface of your choosing. I usually find royalty-free typefaces online. Found this nice one called Thicket, and you can download it and then import it into your font book, and then it should be also visible in Fusion360. Now we finally enter Fusion360, our CAD software. Best practice when you open Fusion360 and a new file is to save your document right away. Fusion actually saves every few seconds, but once you finish your design and you want to export or you want to render, it needs to be saved anyways, so might as well do that at the beginning. Now once we've saved it, we enter the sketch plane. You can select whichever plane you want. I usually go for the front. Select the ellipse part and start sketching out the middle line for 50 millimeters and the width at 10 millimeters. That's correct for my brand name that I want to cover up. Now I finished the sketch, and I'm gonna go into the perpendicular plane, move it over to the length side, and actually start a new sketch plane. Once you selected the plane, select the Spline Tool to create a few, not more than 4 points to select the profile. Jot them down first and up to the end. And then you can still move about some of the points afterwards. You don't need to worry at the beginning anyways. I'm just going to make sure that it's kind of symmetrical and finish the sketch. Now moving over to the surface plane to finally create the brooch shape. I'm selecting the profile and then the guide rail that I just created. And now I actually have a nice looking surface. To actually make it a final object, I need to create some kind of wall thickness, otherwise it is not printable. I'm gonna go for 1 millimeter just to make sure that it's thick enough, and adhering to the guidelines. So I think the minimum for a polished part is 0.8 millimeters. So I'm just going to go for 1 millimeters just to make sure that it's meeting the criteria. I'm going to go create a new sketch plane to start with the text. I'm going to go to the top plane and then go select text. Now draw out the text field just around the edges of the ellipse. Now type in the text that you would like to see on your brooch. For me it's Celsius gross. I will now hunt down my Thicket typeface. There it is. You can select whatever typeface you want, obviously. I'm going to change the height first, then center the text to the middle of the brooch. And now I will just try out some different sizings for my text to see which one fits the best on the brooch. Here we go, 4.5 millimeters. Now the next step is to actually extrude the text you just created. So you need to make your object, the brooch plate, visible. And then it's very important to select the starter point of the text extrusion to be the object. So basically the surface of the brooch, because you want to get the curvature of the brooch in the text as well. Now you can select either join all the elements together of the letters or have separate letters, whatever you want to wish to do. I always go for separate letters because in the end it's easier for me to change it around. Next step on our list is adding some fillets to the letters. Fillets are always a nice finishing touch to hard edges like we have right now on the top of the letters, especially when you create objects that are going to be attached to a clothing piece. For example, if you have a woven object, you do not want to have ridges or burrs on a metal piece. So please make sure that everything that touches a clothing piece has some kind of rounded edge to it. Now we can actually select the sketch plane from the side and start creating a sketch line. This sketch we're creating right now is going to be the base for the enclosure. That's actually going to hold the brooch needle in place. So I've just created kind of like a curved shape with the Spline Tool. And this shape will then be our profile for extruding in the sculpting mode. So finish your sketch, go over to the sculpting mode, select extrusion, and then select the sketch, which is going to be our profile. Extrude it to 2 millimeters, then add symmetry option, add one more segment, and the symmetry line. Now you can right-click and select change form. And here you can now change all the vertices and edges and lines that you need to change to have an enclosure shape. The shape I'm going to call it cobra shape, because it kind of has the side flares and then the head is almost like a curve and a cave, because we need something for the needle to actually hold on to. And the cobra shape kind of gives this tightness to the needle to actually hold it in place. So right now I'm just going to thin down the part at the bottom. Add a thickening tool, so we actually have a solid in the end. I'm going to go back to just a surface mode because it kind of gives me more options to change the design again. Once I'm happy with it, I can go back to thickening and give it some final touches. Now that I've thickened it, I actually need to make sure that I select both points, top and bottom of this surface, so they both move around. I'm just going to add some finishing touches so the needle actually has a nice home to go to. Now I'm going to exit the sculpting mode. And now that I have so many objects, I need to make sure that I can keep up with them and actually now name them. So I'm going to have my brooch plate and then also my enclosure. And all the letters that we see at the bottom, we're actually going to not name them right now because at the end we're joining them all together to export the file. So start a new surface to draw down the needle. I'm going to select the spline again. And now we are going to find the intersection between the brooch and the surface, the sketch plane. And then get a more front view and jot down the points of this needle shape. Once you're kind of happy with the needle shape, you can still go back and change some of the points. It's probably easier that way. Also make sure that you make the needle long enough to actually fit into the enclosure, because once you actually have the final object and you're going to attach it to your sweater, the needle is going to curve much more. So make sure that you have enough length. Now we're going to go into the pipe mode, select the profile, and change the diameter to 1 millimeter. Also change the end point. You can select a pointed end, but I always find it harder to manipulate in the end. Then add less segments. You don't need that many. And that should be fine, like it is. Now we're gonna make the end point a bit more pointed. We don't want it to get stuck in our fabric or not actually fit through. So we're gonna make it more pointed and look like a needle. You can use the manipulator, and then the middle point, you can change the thickness and the measurements of the whole segment to either bigger or smaller. So once we're happy with this, we can actually now, for good practice, measure the segment diameter and see if it goes with our guidelines of gold-plated brass. So it's 0.89 millimeters, and that's thick enough. 0.8 millimeters is the minimum, so we're fine. Finish the sketch, and it looks pretty good to me. Now we're adding some more of the fillets to finalize this object, our little brooch. Right now we're going into the rendering mode just to get a visualization of our gold-plated brooch. So go into the little pie chart on the top row and find the gold material in the search field, drag over the gold into the assembly tree, and then all of your bodies are instantly switched into gold material. You can obviously now change the background, change the setup of the lighting. You can do a live rendering. You can also click on the little teapot on the top row to get a proper rendering, and then export a JPEG and upload it to Instagram, for example. The rendering topic is a very extensive field, so we will cover this in a future video. Now we will just combine all of the bodies into one, so we can export it as a complete STL file. So select the body, pin, and enclosure first, and the letters we will do in another step. You can see we have a lot of bodies there. We just want to combine them so we have a nice, easy upload into the 3D printing service provider. Then just select them all, then right-click on the brooch plate, the single body that's remaining, and exported STL file in a high surface finish. An optional but highly recommended step is to get your brooch 3D printed in a material that is mimicking the final material. So you can now check the enclosure, you can check the appearance, is the text to your liking, is the spacing okay between the letters, all those things before you actually get your final piece printed.
If you enjoyed the content of this video and you really love to learn more about 3D printing, then don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel.